Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today we have a Q&A episode, and I'm actually going to try and get through 5 questions. We'll see. Here, I'm going to go through a couple pretty quickly, and then I'll go through a few just in a little bit more detail. But first, before I dive into that, if you want to learn more about a body recomp, what it is, how to do it, 10 things you need, plus different types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on your body composition, then my free body recomp checklist is for you. The link to that is in the show notes. And again, it's completely free. So definitely go and check it out. And I will give you a good base understanding of everything. All right. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So I'm going to go through the rapid fire ones here first. So first question I got was, should you count all protein towards your protein goal? There's going to be some protein in foods that maybe aren't necessarily protein type foods, right? So the one that always comes to mind are like oats, even a little bit in some rice, things like that. They're going to have some trace amounts of protein in them. You take peanuts as well too. You take peanut butter. All these are going to have some protein in them. And so you're going to find that those will add to your protein numbers. And so should you count those? Collagen, stuff like that. And the answer is yes, you definitely should. I would just count all protein. When we look at a meal for someone who eats a diet that has meat in it, things like that, or I guess I don't even want to say if you eat a diet that has meat in it, you just want to make sure that you have a good solid source of protein. And then I'll talk about if you eat more of a vegetarian style diet, or maybe you just don't have meat in that particular diet, like what we want to look at. But again, we want to make sure we're basing our meal around a source of protein. Okay. Now, when we look at your entire diet, if you have some sort of, again, you eat more vegetarian style, vegan style, certain foods that you just can't have with that, some of those protein sources aren't going to have all the essential amino acids. Okay. Things like dairy and like meat and stuff like that, they're going to have all the essential amino acids that you need. So if you do have to have a diet that doesn't have those types of proteins in it, then you do want to have a good balance. So we want to vary our protein sources so you have a good balance of everything there. So again, if you have, again, some sort of restriction, and you may just want to eat a little bit more protein overall. So again, we want to vary our sources to make sure that we're getting all the essential amino acids, and we likely want to bump up our protein a little bit higher if a big chunk of your protein comes from, again, some of these sources that aren't necessarily have the full amino acid profile there. And again, this is assuming body comp and performance is your top goal. Now, either way, you're still going to want to balance it out if it's not. But again, most people that are listening to this are going to have these body comp goals. So again, we just want to make sure that you vary it and you eat a little bit more protein overall if you can't have all the essential amino acid proteins that have all of them there. But we still want to count it all. Same thing with collagen, count it towards your protein. You just may want to go a little bit higher the more something like collagen makes up your overall protein intake there. So if you eat a high quality diet, do you need supplements? And I would argue yes. So again, a high quality diet being like, oh, I don't need to take supplements because I am just going to get all my vitamins and minerals through food. Or I'm not going to take supplements. You want to get your vitamins through food. And while yes, we want to get the majority of it through food, it's going to be really hard to get all the essential like vitamins and minerals that you need. Again, the way they make food now, it's just going to be hard. Not only is it going to be hard, even if the way they don't go about food processing now at this point and how we get food on the soil, stuff like that, like it still would be really hard to get all of it in general. So I would still recommend one, getting a good multivitamin to like cover your bases. But the top nutrients that I would consider, even if you have a really good like overall diet quality, would be magnesium, vitamin D, creatine, and fish oil. Creatine, you could definitely get through the diet, but you can get all these through the diet. It's just going to be really hard to do. These are going to be vitamins and minerals that are going to be hard to get in the diet, but then also people tend to be lower on in general. So again, vitamin D, it's hard to get through the diet. If you don't get a lot of sun, you might need a little bit more vitamin D. Now, you could be someone who has good amounts of vitamin D, so this is where you would cross-reference with your blood work. But I just think it's a mistake and the wrong way to think of, I'm just going to get all my vitamins and minerals through food. Again, if you don't want to take any supplements, that's totally fine. Just understand that you could be shooting yourself in the foot. And most like fish oil is relatively expensive, but magnesium, vitamin D, creatine are not. And with fish oil, it's okay. Then if you're not getting any fish at all, then okay, especially like fatty fish. We're not talking like, oh, hey, just go get tuna packets, stuff like that, or just eat shrimp. It's, hey, we need to get some fatty fish in there. So things like salmon. Then you do that 2, 3, 4 times a week, you're likely going to need some supplementation from that perspective. So again, I just think that we shouldn't be like, oh, they don't do anything. I'm just going to get all my vitamins and minerals through the food I eat. Again, we want to try and get as much as we can, but just understand it's going to be really hard to do that. And if you're low on these things, it is going to impact your body composition and how you feel. So I posted the story the other day of my hour-long like zone 2 session, and it said I burned 671 calories. And someone was like, did you really burn that many? Maybe I didn't. Any wearable device isn't going to be accurate enough to detect for sure. And we don't want to put too much stock into that, right? I'm not really going to do anything with those calories, even if that's the case. Like that number is not going to tell me anything. All it really tells me is, okay, this was a fairly energy demanding exercise that you did. So maybe you could bump your overall caloric intake up, but you don't want to match it to that, right? Like, be careful with doing that. But at the end of the day, these aren't accurate enough. Yes, they can get an idea of your weight, height, but again, if it's not taking like your body fat percentage, and then on top of it, there's also genetic differences in terms of people's total daily energy expenditure and whatnot. Plus, the energy balance is going to potentially impact that. So it doesn't make any sense to like put any stock into it other than, okay, the good news or the takeaway that I can have with 671 calories is like, hey, that's a pretty good amount of energy expenditure. So it's like maybe if you're trying to maintain energy balance or you're trying to eat in a surplus, or even if you're in a deficit, you may want to bump up your intake a little bit more. But what we want to be careful with is like trying to hit the highest number as possible or trying to burn as many calories as possible. And then even if you're fat loss dieting, it would make sense to be like, that's good, right? That's what you're trying to get. You want to get that deficit. But even then, like you want to be careful with having that output so high and then your intake so low as well too. And on top of it, this is only one part of the energy balance equation or how many calories you'll burn in a day. There's also calories that you'll burn from just basic bodily functions, your BMR, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so like fidgeting, moving, things like that. That's one part of it. And then we have thermic effect food. That's how many calories you burn in just by absorbing and digesting food. And then you have exercise activity. So it's just one piece of it. Plus, on top of it, energy balance is so dynamic that any number your watch spits out at you. Like I said, the only real takeaway that we can have from it is, hey, you probably expended a little bit more energy with that, and that can potentially influence your overall intake slightly there with that. So again, I totally could have, but already off the bat, it's like there's going to be some potential errors with how they measure it, right? And like also they're basing it off of calculations and formulas based off like a certain height and weight. And so it's not accounting for a lot of things that can impact that number. Now, again, it like I said, it can give you an idea and it can tell you if a exercise bout was a little bit more fatiguing or demanding than others there. All right, so that's it for that question. So I had a couple questions around. So one was, hey, is it good to keep exercises the same and progressively overload in my training? And 100% yes. Honestly, that's what we want to do. I think the mistake would be not doing that, of constantly changing things up. So I just want to go over how I program and why I do it this way in terms of like training phases for hypertrophy with this. So why do I use training cycles? So training cycles essentially, hey, we have X amount of workouts, X amount of rep ranges. Maybe we're doing certain things. We have exercise order in terms of when we place certain exercises, and we're obviously trying to get an adaptation within that. And then we're trying to make sure it fits into your current, like how many calories you're eating, what your overall goal is. How do we pair that with, say, like conditioning? And again, a training cycle, that's typically what it is, right? And we keep exercises the same for multiple weeks on end. I'll get into what that potentially looks like, but in terms of the time frame, but we're keeping the same set of workouts for multiple weeks on end, and we're trying to progress those, right? To me, this is going to help you progress more effectively than random weekly workouts. You could totally get away with random weekly workouts, but to me, it's harder to know what's going on there, and you're just guessing. People do it, and you could totally get away with it, but I just think that's a highly ineffective way to go about it from a hypertrophy perspective, and even strength as well, too. But again, we're specifically talking about building muscle here. One of the main reasons is it takes time to learn movements and actually stimulate hypertrophy, right? Most like increases in weight aren't necessarily from a hypertrophy perspective right off the bat. It's typically neuro-related, neuromuscular, and like your body's just getting better at performing that movement, right? So that's the first reason. If we're constantly switching up, we're getting more like neuromuscular gains than we are actually muscle growth there. Plus, when we repeat exercises, one, it helps you improve form. You figure out what works. You figure out how to set up the machine or exercise or whatever. So you get that nailed down. And because of that, now you're able to push harder over time, and it's easier to track progress. Okay. So these are all things that we need to build muscle, right? Like it takes some, I'm sure you've had an exercise that felt like crap the first time you did it, but it's like you started to do it more and it felt better there. And then because of that, now we can push harder, and the setup is just way quicker where you need to set things up at what weight you need to do if you're logging, and then boom, you can just go about it versus if you're doing something new every single time, it's like you got to learn how to do it. You don't know what weight to do. Are you close to fit? Are you progressing? Are you not? You don't know because you're constantly changing it up. So this is why I like to use training cycles from a muscle building standpoint. How long should they last? I would say typically 6 to 12 weeks is going to be the sweet spot for most people. However, it is very context dependent on what's going on in your life, how you're recovering, your motivation towards the training cycle as well too, right? So again, you're going to have what would make somebody stay like closer to 8 to 12 weeks. Recovery's good, motivation's high, you're really enjoying what we're doing, fed, you really push. That would, you don't have any like vacations or anything coming up, we may push you longer. I would always try to push a bit longer, right? Shorter cycles could be like, hey, fatigue super high, you have high life stress, something's going on, you have a vacation coming up and we need to wrap it up. You're not going to train hard during that time. And so that would potentially shorten it. So we're basing it off of like recovery, progress, how you're progressing, results, life stuff that pops up. And so that's what we're typically looking at from a training cycle perspective. Now, okay, so transitioning, what is that going to look like? Like, how do you know when it's time to potentially switch out of that specific training cycle? And then I'll also talk about some changes that I potentially make. Again, if you're starting to feel like unmotivated towards what you're doing, and let's say you're at 6 to 8+ weeks and it's okay, you're starting to get less motivation, certain exercises aren't feeling as great, it's really getting hard to push yourself, you're just not feeling like motivated to train, you're taking longer to recover, that could be a sign, hey, now we potentially go into a new training cycle. And or again, like you have some sort of week where you're not going to be able to train as hard, whatever it may be, you have a vacation, it's okay, let's wrap up this training cycle and go into the next one. So those would be signs that it's getting towards the end. It's getting really hard to progress. Even what you were doing before now to just match is super challenging. Obviously, we're always going to look at our recovery. Could that be dialed in? Our nutrition around training, nutrition in general. Like we always want to look at those things and not just blame it on, oh, I need to go to a new training cycle. Because I do think there is something to pushing into these cycles pretty deep if you can. Now, how are we going to transition? So you don't need to overhaul the whole program. It does depend on what your goals are. If it's like, hey, I need to go into like more of a strength type block for whatever reason, or I need to go into a low volume period because I have some performance goal, or I just don't want to train as much, then the program may change a lot more. But again, if we're just, hey, I want to continue to build more muscle, you don't need to overhaul the program like to where it's like, hey, you're going to do this one setup where it's 4 days a week with X amount of exercise, with this exercise order, with this rep range. And then the next phase, it's like completely different program, all different rep ranges, all new exercises, different day. Like you don't have to do that. And honestly, I like to have less changes. Again, if our goal is just to improve our body composition and build a little bit more muscle, like that's what we're trying to aim for here. So we don't need to overhaul the whole program with that. So ideally what I typically do is I change about 2 to 3 exercises per workout, may swap some rep ranges, may change the rep range a little bit. If it's like, hey, you've been training this exercise in the 5 to 8 rep range for an extended period of time, maybe we go to 8 to 12 for a little bit, right? So something like that. We may shift the exercise order slightly where it's like, hey, you've been doing this exercise first, maybe we switch it to second, and then we have a different body part be the new focus for that workout. Or maybe your pull workout was third of the week, maybe now it's first, and then the push focus workout's now the third, right? Like small changes like that. Or we may introduce like new set structure. So may add in some rest pause sets, supersets, more like length and partial training, like things like that. Like we may alter that a bit. And this is all based on what you've been doing and what kind of training you like in general with that. So that's typically how I will go about changing things up. So hopefully that's helpful and gives you an idea what you need to do from that perspective. But I think training cycles are key and most people overlook that there. All right. So last question of the day is a client asked me about element in particular and was just worried about the amount of sodium. So I'm going to take this not from an element standpoint. I'm going to take this from a sodium standpoint and how I do think it is underutilized for people that train a lot. So again, it kind of has this bad rap of, oh, hey, you want to avoid salt. And for most of the population, again, you're not people that listen to this podcast, people that don't exercise and eat a lot of processed type foods, go out to restaurants a lot. Okay, for them, yeah, they probably don't need any sodium. But if we're training hard, eating clean, there's a good chance that you need to add some sodium into your diet, right? You don't need to go and like pour pounds and pounds of salt of everything. It's just, hey, maybe you need a little bit more. So the first kind of pillar thing here, the first like core thing that is going to tell us if we need more sodium in our diet is, do you sweat a lot? So if you sweat regularly, you're already at a higher need of sodium intake. Okay. And then especially the more you sweat, the more often, the higher your need is. Do you eat a clean diet? So if you're eating like whole foods mostly and not a lot of packaged type foods, going out to a lot of restaurants, you don't get as much salt as you think. And then you combine that with sweating a lot, which is going to be most people that listen to this, you're going to be at a higher need of adding some sodium into your diet. Are you following like a low carb or keto style diet? So if you're low calorie at trying to fat loss diet and you eat a clean diet and you sweat a lot, your need's going to continue to go up. Those are like the 3 main things where if you fall under this, like you're going to probably need some more sodium. I'll go over some other things that may also increase the need for sodium. But for me, these are like the three main pillars there. Do you get lightheaded or feel off during workouts? Low electrolytes can take your performance. I'm huge on hydration, and when I say hydration, yes, water is part of that, but it's also electrolytes and hydration for performance, right? That's people are looking for a perfect pre-workout meal when they overlook salt and electrolytes in general. Sorry, they overlook being hydrated for their training, and even a small amount of dehydration is going to impact your training performance negatively. And so to me, this makes it super important to focus on that there, especially to help with your workouts if you're feeling off. If you're someone who trains fasted or train in the morning, like again, you've likely gone multiple hours without food, potentially having some salt beforehand can help with that. And again, that's also a big thing that I say with people who train fasted is you're going to need some hydration. And so it's probably a good idea to add some sodium if you're going to train fasted, right? If you are like me and you like having a lot of coffee or caffeine, it is a mild diuretic. So it's basically you can increase the amount that you urinate. And so because of that, if you're not replacing with fluids and or electrolytes, you could be at a higher need there. If you have frequent peeing throughout the day and it's super clear and you don't get a lot of sodium in your diet, this could be a sign that, hey, you need to add some sodium in. This is again going to be typically from someone who like is, hey, I'm always hydrated. I drink a ton of water. But if you're not also adding in sodium, maybe you're like weight training and you're feeling flat or you're just like losing a pump. That could be a sign that you need some salt beforehand, right? What I do is, because I like to have coffee and I train in the afternoon, is I'll make a drink with some added salt, or if I have element at the time, I'll do element. And I have a calorie-free or low-calorie lemonade, and I drink that beforehand, and that helps me, one, just feel better overall. Like I instantly feel better, but then I also like it helps with performance, and I'm also well hydrated for training and also getting the salt in there, right? Increased cramping or twitching, that could be a sign that you need some more sodium. And then low blood pressure symptoms, right? So if you're feeling dizzy standing up quickly, or you have a super low resting blood pressure, that could be a sign that you need a little bit more sodium. Now, if one, your doctor tells you need to watch your sodium intake and you have some sort of medical issue, like obviously we don't want to do that. And or if you have high blood pressure, you don't want to add in more sodium. So definitely check with your doctor on this, but most people are going to underutilize sodium, right? So again, hydration isn't just about water. If you're low on sodium, like you're probably not going to feel as great. You're going to have more cramps there. My personal story with this is when I would play hockey, it's a lot of sweating. I would have a little bit of Gatorade and then I would just have water, but I would always just have a little bit of a headache the rest of the day. I just wouldn't feel as great. And then I started using Element, and now, because I'm not actively using Elements, I love Elements, but by no means do you have to take Element in particular. I would just feel so much better throughout the day. So again, a sign that I was getting plenty of water, but not enough like sodium and electrolytes in general there. And it's been super helpful from that perspective. So for people who listen to this, you probably need a little bit more sodium. So don't be scared of it. It's going to help you feel better and perform better and look better while you're working out too. So that's it for this episode. I hope this was helpful. If you guys have found this podcast to be helpful anyway, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find this podcast. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_, and that's where I'm most active on social media. You can ask me any questions on the podcast, or if maybe something that didn't make sense, you can reach out and let me know there. So that's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.